Hi everyone. Good to see you on my channel today. Today I will tell you a wonderful story. It is full of love and kindness. I hope you enjoy it and I wish you an enjoyable viewing experience. Thank you.
He did not know why especially vivid memories of that day, when his world turned upside down, shattered into 1,000 shards, come exactly on rainy nights, burst into dreams viscous, like tar, nightmares from which you cannot get out. You can only fall and fall further and deeper into them, until the saving morning comes, and you do not realize that it is just a dream. However, it did not bring much relief, because the consequences of the experience reminded Sam of himself every day. He tried to sleep with the windows closed, curtained with thick curtains, and turned on the background radio or white noise all the same. If the night was rainy, then everything repeated. Psychologists, to whom the man went for some time, said that it probably manifests itself so meteosensitivity, and prescribed more sedatives and antidepressants. But Sam just threw away the prescription. He had long ago realized that no pills would help him. That day just broke him, literally and figuratively. And it all started with the fact that he, a green kid, as soon as he was old enough, went to the police academy. In general, his mother and stepfather said that with his abilities, excellent grades, he should apply to one of the Ivy League universities, that he should become a lawyer and build his American dream. But Sam firmly decided he wants to protect law and order. He decided he was going to be a police officer when he and his mom first came to America. They came to live a full and happy family. She married Martin Steele, whom she met when she worked as a secretary in the same firm. Martin came as a foreign investor, saw the red-haired Angelica, and lost his head. He proposed to her on the third day of their acquaintance, then issued a fiancé visa. He was not confused by the fact that she was divorced and had a teenage son. Sam, who was 12 years old at the time, at first took his mother's decision in a flip. They lived together normally. He did not need a stepfather. The thing was that Sam's father died 40 years ago in a car accident, but the pain from the loss of a native man is not weakened. But then, reflecting on the fact that his life is one thing, and the desire of his mother to arrange his female happiness is another, Sam agreed to move. He made a sincere effort to mend his relationship with his stepfather, and it was working out pretty well. Sam could admit to himself that he wanted to become a policeman, not without the influence of all those action movies in which the good guys beat the bad guys. He dreamed that he would have a faithful partner, with whom they would eat donuts on duty, and then he would have a dog, a German shepherd. Sam and his family lived in a small town south of San Francisco. After graduating from the academy, the guy was hired to work in the police station, and that's where it turned out that dreams and reality are quite different. His partner was Billy, a tough cop, who had nothing left until retirement, and least of all, he wanted to mess with a young rookie. Besides, Billy absolutely hated three things: idle chatter, violation of plans thought out with jewel-like precision, and crumbs from donuts or any other food in his car. But Sam didn't mind his work, tried not to anger his partner, and in general, life in the small town sometimes seems so safe that you'd think the police weren't needed here at all. I mean, they are, of course, but not in the sense that the cops are always shooting, organizing chases with the support of helicopters and all that. And then it happened. The town was rocked by a series of violent attacks on the homeless. It all started with Maggie, an old lady with a supermarket cart on which was attached a tattered beach umbrella, known to everyone, pitied and helped her as best they could. They offered to put her in an orphanage, but Maggie didn't agree. She had settled on the streets after she tragically lost her only daughter, and had wanted no other life ever since. Some scumbag rode a motorcycle at night to the bridge under which Maggie slept and attacked her. It was an act of pure animalistic aggression. Doctors barely pulled the old woman out of the world. She had broken ribs, legs, and arms. A few days later, the attack was repeated. Monster in human form intercepted Steve, who was homeless as if on the half at his sandal shack on the outskirts, but almost all days spent with an outstretched hand near supermarkets. Steve was attacked on his way home. In general, Steve was disliked a little bit because he was a young, strong man, but he liked alcohol so much that he quit his job. He could give a hard word if he didn't get a handout. But the townspeople were on the side of this lost soul after the attack. Steve went blind and lost almost all his teeth. Then there were other victims among the homeless, and then journalists found out such details that made the town stand on its ears. It turned out that there were several attackers. Each of these scumbags would commit 2 or 3, as the journalists called it, sessions and then dissolve. That is, each of the criminals attacked several homeless people and then disappeared, and another one took his place. It was as if all these people had a specific purpose, as if they were performing some kind of ritual. Bullshit, Billy said, and folded the paper he'd been reading earlier. They're just trying to scare the crap out of people. You don't believe it? Sam asked plaintively and got a glare from his partner. That there's a gang whose members take turns almost killing homeless people. You know, kid, I've seen all sorts of things. And the Mexican border ain't that far away, Billy grinned. But this, I don't remember it being this wild. The press exaggerates some of the details, of course, but mostly they don't lie. I'm afraid when we catch these scumbags, we'll have to keep the townspeople on the defensive too, lest they tear them apart before the trial. And this last one, Sam fidgeted in his seat. It was a sweltering day, and he'd been waiting for a good time to ask his partner to go out and get a cold drink and a snack. The last one who attacked, what did the detectives say? He's going to do another attack. Well, because every one of them should attack a few homeless people. You're a magpie, you're making my head buzz, the cop grumbled, but today he was in a pretty good mood and even talkative. You see, we have a theory that this thing is escalating. I mean, next time he might not stop at just beating the crap out of you. Well, you know what I mean. The homeless are almost off the streets. Who's out of town, who's in a shelter, and the ones that are left, they're in packs. Pardon me for being blunt. It's logical he's unlikely to attack where there's a lot of people. So on the one hand, it's good for the homeless, but not so good for us. What do you mean? Sam doesn't get it. I mean, man, if the homeless were sitting where they used to be, we could put more people out there for surveillance, and we could catch the perp. But this way, I don't know how long we'll be tracking him down. I see, Sam said thoughtfully. A plan was already brewing in his head. What the? Are you out of your mind, rookie? Billy had attacked his partner at the police station in front of everyone, literally grabbed him by the collar of his uniform shirt and demanded an explanation, as if he were a delinquent juvenile. The confrontation took place a couple days after that very conversation in the car. It turned out that Sam had gone to the highest authority and proposed a crazy, just reckless plan to catch the criminal. Or maybe all criminals in the end, I wanted to believe it. The brass went along with it. Even Detective Scott, the man skeptical of everything, seemed by his very nature to support Sam. I'm just doing my job, Sam replied defiantly to his partner, and lashed out, shaking his hands off of him. What do you think you're in a Hollywood movie and you're the coolest guy? No, I don't think that. And you know what? I'm not new. I've been in the service for 6 months. And in that time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've had nothing to reproach me with. Billy stepped back, took a deep breath, and exhaled slowly, ran his palm through his curly, graying hair, adjusted his tie. Okay, now that we're in this together, okay, I'm not refusing to work with you. Sam nodded. He really did realize that his plan was too bold, and it consisted of Sam pretending to be a homeless man who was also in a wheelchair. It was to spend several evenings and nights in the hottest, most deserted corners of the city, following the same route, which, of course, if Scott's assumptions were correct, would surely attract the thug's attention. And then, when he showed up, he could be caught red-handed by the cops lurking nearby. Sam was looking forward to this dangerous adventure, but he didn't tell his parents about any of it. Why should he? They'd already thought that he had made a mistake with his choice of profession. The first 2 nights in his new character were uneventful. Sam was tense to the max. It seemed to him that everything was about to happen, but everything was quiet. On the third night, the weather was such that it seemed as if the sky was about to rain, but something was preventing it, as if there were a giant flap up there. The air smelled of ozone, was humid and stuffy. It seemed that the pre-threat tension could literally be felt with the hands. Sam sat in his wheelchair, wrapped in rags. He was changed beyond recognition. He had a beard and mustache glued on, a cap on his head, and a few patches. Under the dirty patch on his ear was an earpiece, through which his partner and Detective Scott periodically reported to him the situation, saying, "Quiet all, no one." "I see somebody," that was Billy's voice. "You okay in there?" "All right," Sam said, tilting his head to his shoulder, where a miniature walkie-talkie was hidden under the rags. "Is he coming my way?" "Who knows? Maybe he's just a passerby." "He's at that diner where Scott and I got coffee. The coffee's disgusting, by the way. It's making me sick." Sam craned his neck, and a man came up from the bottom of the sloping street. He was about 2 meters tall, dressed in black jeans, a spiked leather jacket, and he's wearing a mask, Sam hastily relayed. "And he's got a... Oh, man, he's got a chain in his hand." He was definitely not wearing a mask when he entered the store, though we couldn't see his face. But the flashlight was out, Scott said. "Looks like he's our client. Be careful out there." Sam tensed. He realized that, theoretically, if the guy was coming, he could get a couple of bruises while the reinforcements arrived, which were only a few dozen meters away. But Sam also relied on the fact that he had good training, and he went to karate classes on weekends. The young policeman watched the man who, now there was no doubt, was coming straight at him. The black ski mask had a frightening pattern of a grinning skull. His black gloved hands were clutching a chain that, with proper skill, could be used as a weapon. Sam shuddered as the man walked silently, unhurriedly, and seemed to emanate waves of hatred and aggression. And then Sam did something he hadn't agreed to, neither with his superiors when they approved the operation, nor with his partners. He jumped up from his chair when the man was already at arm's length and threw himself at him. "Asshole!" bellowed Billy in his earpiece, scolding his partner without hesitation. Sam grinned triumphantly, and the masked man staggered back, clearly not expecting the handicapped man to fight back. But, "Police, don't move." Sam shouted and rushed to the attack, but he missed a blow to the solar plexus and bent down, gulping for air like a beached fish. There were some strange noises in the earpiece. "Scott, are you okay?" "Hey, what are you doing?" "Damn. Coffee." The coffee was poisoned. There, in the shadows of the factory closed for the night, Sam's partner and the detective passed out. But Sam, even though he realized something was wrong, couldn't do anything about it because he himself was now pinned down again, thrown to the ground, and his shoulder exploded with pain. What the hell was that? He was the best at self-defense. That's just impossible. Through the ugly shadows dancing in front of his eyes, the flashing lights of police cars burst in and hit his eyes. But here was the problem. They were too far away. Freeze! Sam struggled to get up. He was wobbly. "Police, you're under arrest." He saw the masked man rush away, disappearing into a narrow alley that led to a part of the city where no one had lived for a long time. The land had been bought up for demolition of dilapidated buildings and construction of a new amusement park. Rising up, the guy gathered all his strength and rushed in pursuit. He can't let him get away. Something bad had happened to his partner and Scott, and he just couldn't really turn out to be the green rookie who was only good for messing things up. Sam raced on, unable to feel his feet under him. A turn. A garbage pile. Another turn. The guy bopped his head up. The bandit was on top of him, preparing to take off across the rooftops. No longer urging him to surrender, Sam just threw himself up. He suddenly stopped, straightened to his full height, and began to unfasten his chain. Sam froze. What techniques to use here? He didn't have time to think about it, and the steel scraped across the roof, almost catching him. Ducking and dodging, the young policeman began to approach his opponent. He returned the chain to himself, wrapped part of it around himself, slung over his shoulder, and wrapped the other end around his arm, creating a kind of brass knuckles and armor at the same time. But it didn't scare Sam. He lunged forward. The blows came from both sides. And then Sam felt himself falling. He thought that he would get up immediately. He had already grouped himself in these moments. Except that suddenly there was a terrible cracking sound under his back, and the guy realized that he had broken through the dilapidated roof. The nightmarish flight continued, and the last thing Sam remembered was the hideous mask of the criminal leaning over the breach in the roof. And then he waved to the policeman. And that was it. He was swallowed by darkness. Sam woke up in the hospital. At first, he was just glad that he was alive, and even, it seems, nothing hurts. But the doctor who appeared next to the bed, as if he had read his thoughts, said that it would hurt, and very much, because now he was just under the influence of painkillers. What happened? The doctor sent Sam a look as if it should have been clear to him. But then he patiently explained. He started with the small fact that no vital organs had been damaged in the fall, that luckily the spine had been saved. Almost. What do you mean? Sam got worried. Well, you know, I'm not a little kid, so tell it like it is. And that's when the doctor said that Sam was no longer fit to be a police officer. Never again. And he probably won't be able to live like before because as a result of multiple injuries, some critical areas of the body were broken, which provides Sam with a limp for the rest of his life, a ban on heavy physical activity, and as a bonus a tremor of the left hand, which can be fought, but it won't save him, in fact. No, the boy shook his head. No, this couldn't be happening. Sam was simply refusing to accept everything that had happened to him. He breathed often and tried as he was lying down to move his arms and legs. The doctor had hinted to him that for now even the rehabilitation period was as far away as the movement the guy relaxed exhaustedly. I had a partner with me, and Detective Scott. What about them? The doctor sighed, clearly stressed by such a troubled patient. Are you ready for a visitor? But not for long, he finished steadily. Yes, all right. Who is it? Commissioner Montgomery entered the room at the doctor's invitation. This overweight man with the bushy mustache and keen blue eyes was crumpling his cap in his hands, which showed his extreme agitation. Usually, when he was nervous or angry, he just took it off and held it in his hands. You're a lively fellow. They say you were put together piece by piece. Montgomery nodded at all the plaster and bandages and was covered with that, made him look like an ancient Egyptian mummy. The conversation was brief but fact-filled. Montgomery, it was felt, was clearly anxious to get on with his unspoken duty and get away. He said Detective Scott and Dilly were barely hurt, but of course it was no good suddenly swallowing a powerful sleeping pill. He said that Detective Scott was transferred to another city due to a botched operation, and Billy is still laid up in the hospital and doesn't want to know Sam. Yeah, man, this investigation was like an asteroid hit on the dinosaurs, Montgomery said. It made them all extinct, Sam said grimly. Well, you're right. That's not the best metaphor. But anyway, the feds took the investigation away from us. What? You know how it goes. So now we're out of the picture. Sam's last sentence was painfully slow to make sense of it. What do you mean? We've done so much. Now others will do it for us. I'm not going to let this go. You ought to learn to walk again, boy, Montgomery coughed. You're no longer on the force, so you can't do anything. Don't look like a coyote. My hands are tied too. Well, that's okay. The feds are no dumber than we are. They'll figure it out. We've got our own things to do. Can you believe it? Somebody took all of old Jim's laundry that his wife hung out to dry. Now we're investigating the theft of sheets and underpants from the Great Depression. The joke lightened the atmosphere a little, what? Sam felt as if his whole world had shattered into atoms, and then reassembled, but in the wrong order. And in essence, that was roughly what it felt like. Lastly, Montgomery said that he had already inquired about Sam's insurance and that he would receive a substantial sum, which would certainly serve him well in the meantime. And there would be, it seemed, a disability pension. "I'm not an invalid," said Sam, staring at the ceiling as Montgomery left. "I'm not an invalid," he shouted. "I'm a policeman." And then the doctor came in and began to talk long and tediously about his upcoming treatment plan. Sam listened to him, but he didn't hear him. He didn't really care what was going to happen to him now. Naturally, Sam's parents became aware of what had happened. Mom cried. Stepfather looked seriously, but with sympathy. There was no question of Sam returning to his rented apartment. He moved into his parents' house, and time dragged painfully slowly on. And no matter how much he protested against his helpless, pathetic, worthless physical condition, he had to accept it. I had to take medicines, go to procedures. To get more precise, I had to go to them in a wheelchair. You had to do physical therapy. The first time Sam saw a wheelchair, he got really hysterical. This wasn't a game. It wasn't an assignment. For the first time outside the house, Sam felt as if he were a character from the circus. For some reason, it seemed to him that the people around him looked at him with squeamish pity, and even with condemnation, as if it was written on his forehead that he was a bad cop who had failed the mission and caused the good guys to suffer. After all, if he hadn't started all this, Scott wouldn't have been transferred, and Billy would have retired without ending his career with a failure. In a way, he was lucky that he didn't have a wife or children, said Stuart grimly to one of the policemen who had come to visit a former colleague. "I'm sorry to say, but at least he's only ashamed in front of his colleagues and friends, not his family." "What did the detectives say?" "It's been classified," Stuart said. "It's just some bullshit that's come out." "Well, between you and me, rumors have started. Allegedly, all this may be the work of some sect. And some writers have even come to the conclusion that we, the police, may be in cahoots with these scumbags. Supposedly, that's why we can't catch them. Because we don't want to. By the way, no more attacks. It's over, that's it. I should be happy," Sam said honestly. "That it's over, but it's like I don't have the energy for it. I feel that I don't even feel good. All right, well, get strong and get back on track. I mean, back to normal." Stuart got up and went to leave the living room, but stayed on the threshold and winked at Sam. "Maybe if you learn what you need to learn, you'll go back to the police." "The doctors would disagree with you," grinned the boy bitterly. "That's not what I mean. Maybe you could teach at the academy." After his acquaintance left, Sam thought a lot about these words and realized more and more that he couldn't. He just couldn't stand being a crippled teacher and seeing every day around him healthy, strong guys and girls who could serve in the police force for the good of society. Wowdy. Slowly, Sam's health began to improve, and when he started to get up from the chair, albeit holding on to the walker, he began to accept the shortcomings of his body more easily, and the world around him didn't seem so hostile anymore. On the contrary, he suddenly began to notice how many good people there were around who helped him to get goods from the right shelf in the supermarket, who opened doors for him. In general, things slowly got better. And exactly 1 year after that tragic day, Sam was able to take his first independent steps without support. His mother cried with joy, and Sam himself could not refrain from tears. His stepfather hugged him and said, "I'm proud of you, son. Way to go." And now it was time to really think about what to do next. While Sam had been sick, he had been deprived of his usual pastimes and hobbies, but he had more time than ever to read. At first he took up books, but it turned out that newspapers and magazines, and especially criminal chronicles, were much more interesting to him than fictional adventures. "I think I'm going to be a journalist," he told his parents one day. The family gathered for dinner. His mother prepared her signature turkey and a huge bowl of green peas that were swimming in butter, with finely chopped pieces of bacon. "Oh, what an interesting choice," she said, but gave her son a worried look. "You could be a freelance journalist with a freer schedule and more choices," Sam continued, putting mashed potatoes on his plate. For all the years he'd lived in America, he'd never gotten used to the fact that his mother stubbornly put potatoes in all the dishes that required potatoes, its American counterpart, yams, which gave any dish a characteristic, and to Sam's taste rather unpleasant sweetness. It was good at least mashed potatoes, and his mother cooked it as usual, as it was still at home in the motherland with butter, milk, and eggs. His stepfather, by the way, also found such mashed potatoes very appetizing. "Excellent choice," Martin said. "You've always managed to write very well. Why don't you try your hand at detective stories?" "No, Dad," Sam sighed. "I'm not really into it. Life is more interesting than any book after all." "You think so?" Martin grinned. "And how can life compete with the adventures of a detective, for example, on a tropical island, where he exposes an arms dealer, steals his beautiful bride, and finds a pirate treasure, and also discovers psychic abilities? And this man reproaches me for reading paperback novels." Angelica smiled and touched her husband's arm affectionately. Sam looked lovingly at his family. How great it was that his mother was able to love, and how great it was that, although they were all so different, all with their own tastes, they could find a common language. It turned out that becoming a journalist was much easier than Sam thought. He just had to finish special courses, and then, given his previous service in the police, he was willingly accepted, as he wanted in the status of a freelancer in several publications. Of course, they were small publications, but the content in them sometimes turned out to be quite interesting. Sam had almost stopped talking to his old police colleagues. Just a few words if they crossed paths in the city. Another year passed, and finally the guy was able to return almost to his former form. Although it would be more accurate to say that he convinced himself that he was fine. Everything was as before. But in reality, Sam quickly tired of any exertion. His whole body ached. His hand could start shaking at the most inopportune moment. As soon as the state of health allowed him to manage his own life and allowed finances, because huge sums of money were flying away for treatment, because insurance could not cover everything, Sam decided to move away from his parents. "But why so far away, son?" Mom asked. "Another city. It's not wise." "I'm healthy now, Mom," Sam replied patiently. I need a change of scenery. Plus, I'd already contacted several newspapers there, and they're willing to work with me." "Come on. It's only a few hours by bus. I'll come on weekends." "Well, okay." The parent gently brushed away a tear. "It's just that I'll still be very worried about you." "It would be weird if I wasn't." Sam sighed and hugged his mom tightly. The new town was further south, even closer to Mexico. On the one hand, life here flowed in a measured way, so that it might even seem that everything was stuck in the 80s. But on the other hand, there were several large industrial enterprises here. It was considered one of the key transportation hubs in the southern states, so it was quite crowded. In order to bring more variety into his life and earn more money at the same time, Sam decided that from time to time he could even choose to go on self-organized business trips to write his articles. But in general, as with the police service, the reality of being a freelance journalist who fed off crime stories and the like was not so fantastically interesting. So, when Sam was writing a story about thefts at a gas station, he had to face the local version that the thieves were werewolves, some kind of evil sorcerers who can turn into wolves. "You'll get used to everything," the gas station attendant told him calmly. "Don't pay attention, that's all. In fact, another in your place would not miss a chance in such a version to cover. All the paranormal, spread like hotcakes." "I'm not interested," Sam sighed. "I have no idea what else to write about. Sometimes I think it's better to retrain a little, and in addition to crime to write, for example, about gardening. It's bad for you, but good for us." The salesman winked at him. "So we live peacefully. What else do you need?" And suddenly he added thoughtfully, "If you want a really difficult case, I can advise something." Sam had already developed a peculiar instinct during his work, and this time it said the case promises to be really worthwhile. Such material can be sold profitably. The next day, the guy found himself in front of the gate, which together with a long fence blocked the entrance to the ranch with the poetic name of Turquoise River. He learned that the river with this name really existed here, but in the 19th century and at the beginning of the 20th century, partly lost its sources of power, partly was destroyed by man. Only this name has been preserved. "Good afternoon," he was called and turned around. He had to raise his head and squint at the sun shining from the back of the rider who rode up on a cow-eyed stallion. Knowing how the local people were in this region, how they disliked suspicious strangers, Sam hurried to introduce himself and tell them why he had come. "You won't get any scoop," replied the girl. She had dismounted during their brief conversation, and Sam had an opportunity to get a better look at her. She looked to be about 25 years old, her brown hair as if it had been lightened by the sun. But he, though he was no expert in women's fashion, but since his mother was accustomed to grooming herself, realized it was the skillful lightening of hair in a beauty parlor. The girl had tanned, slightly weathered skin covered with amber-red freckles on a neat nose and high cheekbones. She had piercing brown eyes, and looking at her, Sam could have sworn that her ancestors had the blood of the Indians, the original inhabitants of these states, in their veins. The girl was dressed simply and cowboyishly, jeans, half-boots, a plaid shirt, and a hat. The latter, however, gave away the sensitive and even romantic nature of the mistress, and a bunch of wildflowers was tucked into the strap around the hat. "I'm not looking for a scoop," Sam answered honestly. "I just want to find out the truth and tell it. And maybe I can help you." "Very honest but presumptuous," she shrugged. The detective said it was a hopeless case, but we can at least try. "Are you a detective?" "No," the guy hesitated. "I used to be a cop, until one incident." "An accident," he added, overpowering himself. "Which made me like this." He spread his hands. Naturally, she couldn't help but notice that he was limping, and his left arm was trembling, but she tactfully didn't let it show, and now she didn't feel sorry for him. And Sam liked it so much that it made him uncomfortable to be pitied. It made him angry. Okay, she finally made up her mind and opened the gate. "My name is Rachel. Let's go inside and talk about everything, and then I'll show you the place where everything happened." She nodded at his parked car. "We got everybody in the neighborhood. But still, better park it on the ranch property." Turns out Rachel's the boss of the place. She took over the ranch 7 years ago after her father died, and since then, she's been running the usual business, raising woolly sheep, but she's had time to do other things. Turquoise River Ranch was known as a sanctuary for predatory animals that could not exist without human help. Some of them were transferred to appropriate wildlife care centers to be returned to the wild after a period of rehabilitation or maturation, as was the case with the cubs, but some, mostly old or hopelessly sick, stayed at the ranch permanently. "My brother is making a detour right now," Rachel said as they entered the kitchen. "We also have Rosita, my nanny, and now a housekeeper, and a few employees all the time. Everyone's busy. Rosita went to town to buy groceries, so we're all alone in the house." "I promise to behave," Sam said, raising his hands. "I mean, I won't get to talk to anyone else right now," Rachel grinned. "But thanks for the warning. Tea, coffee?" "Same as you," he said, looking around. The kitchen was spacious with lots of utensils, and it was obvious that they knew how to cook for a large crowd. But everything was sparkling clean and seemed well organized. "A month ago, I would have said we would be drinking whiskey," sighed the landlady. "I can't imagine how I kept from sinking a little into the bottle. But it's a good thing it didn't happen. So we're having coffee, with spices, cream, and sugar." Sam nodded. He was used to drinking coffee black, but it would be uncomfortable to change his mistress's opinion now. After the coffee was drunk, Sam turned on the recorder with Rachel's consent and got down to business. He was interested in all the details, and the girl willingly shared them. "So he was kidnapped," summarized the journalist and self-proclaimed detective. "Yes, that's what it's called," Rachel sighed. "Would you like to see it? At the place where everything happened, well, and in general. Sam said yes. Let's go to the part of the ranch where there were cages for animals. Rachel asked about Sam's accent and assumed that he, judging by it in his name, must be from Eastern Europe. I'm from Russia, the boy replied, but my grandfather was really from Romania. Mom had named him after him. Finally, they arrived. Sam had expected to see something like the cages one might find in zoos of the 90s, but it turned out that the animals were kept in spacious enclosures with all the amenities. And you're not afraid? Frankly, he asked the question that had been on his tongue since the beginning. They are predators. Coyotes, a few cougars, and one strange, long-legged wolf of reddish color. Sam honestly could not imagine how one could sleep well, knowing that such things lived near your house, not to mention going into their enclosures and contacting them in general. And if they got out one day, would they run away? And in general. He shook his head. I think Rachel is very brave to take such a risk. They're actually very smart, the girl said, and pointed her finger at a cougar that was lying under the canopy. Huge Eyes watched the visitors carefully. That's our old lady. She has dental problems and a limp on her hind leg. She's the most docile. Would you like to pet her? I refrained, Sam answered, and added honestly, I'm just afraid. Rachel looked at him carefully, but didn't laugh. It's okay, she said, and then walked over to another enclosure that was now empty. It was here. Sam stepped closer. The lock had been knocked off, and though he knew very little about what had happened, the picture came vividly to his mind's eye. Night. The inhabitants of the ranch are sound asleep. An unknown man enters the territory, apparently putting the inhabitant of the enclosure to sleep. Of course he does. How else would it be possible to kidnap a tiger? Rachel said that they found tire tracks just outside the ranch, but the police lost track of them from there. They're saying he used to live in a traveling circus. Sam rubbed his chin. Yes, Rachel nodded. Maybe they wanted to make him an entertainer again. Not the former owner. I remember you saying he'd been shut down. The guy was devouring soft meat in a juicy, spicy sauce and was absent-mindedly looking around. And then his gaze lingered on one of the visitors. He was sitting at the far table, his back to Sam. Even as he sat there, he could tell that he was a very tall man. He was strongly built and dressed in black leather, so he looked very much like a biker. Sam didn't immediately realize what had drawn his attention to this man. But then he suddenly froze. A tattoo. A black and red tattoo on the back of his neck, below the nape of his neck. It was just unbelievable when possible and generally wrong, but it must have been when he'd failed the mission that his attacker had hit him hard on the head after all, because later, when the detectives came to the hospital, Sam couldn't remember that during the fight when they'd been twirling around each other, he had noticed that particular tattoo. But now seeing this man, he remembered right away. "Eddie, where are you going?" asked Pablo to Sam. Now he answered and stood up, heading towards the leather-clad type. He passed by, pretending to be interested in the retro-style jukebox against the wall. But the corner of his eye was drawn to his neck. A black and red tattoo. Two snakes fighting. He remembered that tattoo. It was definitely him. Sam walked back, carefree, not at all interested in his customer at the far table. He sat back down and started the chili con carne as if nothing had happened. He and Pablo talked some more, and then Sam got it up. "You leaving already? You know I'm trying out a new brownie recipe." "Later, buddy. Later." After waving goodbye to the owner of the diner, Sam went outside. There was no way he was going to lose this guy with the tattoo. And the tiger. I guess this investigation could wait a little longer. Sam had never thought of himself as a great detective, but he was an ex-cop, so he had an advantage. He followed the man stealthily for about 2 blocks. Then he turned into the Chinatown. Sam grinned. "Well, buddy, unless you're an outsider, and if you're doing business with the locals, you're easy to figure out." Meanwhile, the strange man turned around. Could he feel that he was being followed? Sam darted to the side and held his breath. You couldn't screw this up. He got a good look at the man. A white man of about 45, that's for sure, but his face might look much older, and Sam could have sworn that his face reflected the traces of every addiction a man could have. Could it be a coincidence that two men of about the same build had the same tattoos? Theoretically, yes, except that Sam, during his time as a cop and freelance crime journalist, wasn't used to believing in coincidences. A man walked into a drugstore, and then he came out of it. And then a car stopped in the alley, a black sedan, and a tattooed man got in. Sam remembered the license plate number and realized that this was the end of his surveillance. But now the game was taking a new turn. Sam entered the shop. It was more of a traditional Chinese potion shop than a modern pharmacy. Behind the counter stood a guy in his 20s. He was reading, or rather looking at a magazine with pretty girls, and didn't even turn his head to the visitor. There was a man here. I want to know what he bought. With these words, Sam moved a $50 bill with his fingers on the counter. That was generous, but sometimes you had to pay more for the right information, and Sam somehow knew, as if his intuition had kicked in, that this was where he could get a clue. Because this guy with the tattoo didn't look like a man who suddenly needed to go to the drugstore for vitamins, for example. Of course, there was still a possibility that he was a regular and generous customer. In this case, the boy would not say anything. The boy broke away from the contemplation of the beauties. Yes, he bought something. Actually, I haven't seen him here before, but it was a big order. He stopped talking, but Sam knew there was more to it. With his sad sigh that he would have to eat hamburgers again, the first bill was joined by a second one of the same denomination. Now the young Chinaman acted in a businesslike manner, quickly tucked the money into his pocket, and called out a drug. What is it? Sam arched an eyebrow. A tranquilizer. A strong one. Usually used by veterinarians to make animals calmer, like after surgeries so they don't hurt themselves. And it used to be used in traveling circuses. The guy was really generous with the information. Thank you, Sam nodded. He was about to leave, but the boy added something else. He bought a lot, enough to take down a tiger. Sam chuckled. What interesting information, but what could it have to do with? He couldn't believe that this guy could be a veterinarian who, for example, treated some large livestock. The guy stopped abruptly. One thing began to suddenly add up to another, and it was the guy's strange phrase that pushed him to it. He said that it was enough to bring down a tiger. Of course, it was just an appropriate comparison, considering how many images of all sorts of animals revered in this culture, including tigers, were in the neighborhood. However, is it possible that by chance he met a man who not only had a part in his nightmarish past, but also had something to do with what had happened at Ratzel's ranch? That same evening, after doing his usual, one might say routine, back exercises and eating dinner, Sam dialed one number. He had promised he wouldn't call this person, but, "Hi, Bo," he said, and patiently began to listen to the silence on the other side. I thought we had it all worked out, buddy. Decided that you're leaving me alone. I could feel that Bo was very tense. I know, I need your help, Sam said. What? No, that's out of the question. Or haven't you done your laundry in a while? If that's the case, I'm at your service. I work at the laundromat, you know the address. Come on in. Sam rolled his eyes, knowing full well that he was in some way to blame for Bo. The thing was that some time ago, in the course of his journalistic investigation, he had come across a group of hackers. And it so happened that the police had decided to use his information. And suddenly it turned out that one of his friends, whom he thought was a programmer, was also a hacker and belonged to the same group of attackers. Bo managed to avoid real punishment only because he had actively cooperated with the authorities. In fact, Bo told Sam that he knew that sooner or later his company would be busted, and yet he thought Sam was to blame. Bo had to give up his old career, and now he tried to work honestly. It worked out when he could, and for the last 6 months he had been working in a laundry. Bo immediately realized what kind of help his old acquaintance was talking about. He realized that Sam wanted to get some information. Bo was a master at finding information, except he didn't always do it the legal way. "I'm done," and he said it was the right thing to do. You see, Sam decided to tell the truth, and then he spilled everything he thought he knew. "Oh," Bo said meaningfully after a long pause. "You know, this story is just getting started and I don't like it anymore. Why were you with the police with all this? Do you think they'll listen to me? Do you think that failure alone is like a stigma on you? I don't know. But what I do know is that we have to act fast. Come on, Bo. All we got to do is run the numbers. That's easy for you to say, but I might know what we can do about it. I know some people, so maybe we can find out, even if we stay relatively within the law. Can you do it tomorrow? Before lunch, preferably." "Oh, okay. Just in honor of you putting in a good word for me. Bo never forgets a good deed." "That's great. I'm counting on you." By 10 o'clock a.m. the next day, Sam had all the information. It turned out that the car belonged to a certain Antonio, nicknamed Corson, which he earned when he helped illegal immigrants cross the border between Mexico and the United States. However, some of his clients, usually those who did not have enough money to pay for the full package of services, were in great debt because of Antonio, and after they got to the U.S., in fact, almost sold them into slavery. Men into labor and women. After serving time for these cases, Antonio, however, got back in touch with the bad guys. It was also said that he had something to do with Mario Rodriguez, a reclusive millionaire about whom they said all sorts of things. But there was no evidence of bad deeds, if there were no. It was known only that he was driving cars between the States and Mexico, and also actively sponsors beauty contests, where, as again was known from rumors, he chooses young mistresses. After lunch, Stan called Bo again. "Can you find out where that car went?" "I don't know, bad. I'm not going to hook up the traffic cameras for you and stick my neck out for the authorities. Are you out of your mind? If Mario Rodriguez has anything to do with this, I suggest you buy a ticket to Martinique and get out before it's too late. But don't cross him." "But I won't do that." "I know you're crazy. Does your mom know? Or does she think you write about farmers' shows, cowboy rodeos, and tourists getting their wallets snatched at nightclubs?" There was a pause between the two on the phone. Okay, Bo sighed, and Sam could have sworn his acquaintance was tugging at his dreadlocks like he always did when he was worried. "I found out something else here. I just got lucky. I didn't break anything." "I believe you. What did you find out?" "Well, your guy with the tattoo went to the hospital recently. He had a weird wound on his leg like he'd been bitten by a big predatory cat. Got some first aid and got out." "Are you sure?" The ghostly suspicions in Sam's head are starting to take shape. "Okay. Can I ask you one more favor?" "Let me guess," Bo sighed doomedly. "You're going to call me, pressing my conscience, saying it's a very important case until I agree. Look, man, why'd you do it in the first place? You want to help this chick so bad. Her name is Rachel. So it's serious. Okay, tell me, what else can Bo do for you? The Lobster Bar in New York, the nightclubs of Madrid, the Royal Lily Restaurant in Provence." The man sitting in front of Sam was poring over papers that stated where he supposedly worked. "You have an excellent list of positions. I confess, I don't often come across such diverse applicants. Is that the Sequoia Hotel in Tokyo?" The man gave Sam a hard stare. "Is that a hotel in the hotel group of the same name here in the States?" "I didn't realize they opened in Japan." "No, it's just the same name," Sam quickly realized, and made a mental note to thank Bo for being so meticulous and responsible with his resume. Bo was right, it was a crazy idea, but Sam couldn't think of anything better to sneak into Mario Rodriguez's house than to pretend to be an applicant for a maid position. And now, sitting in the office of the firm through which Senor Rodriguez was accustomed to hire smart, and most importantly able to keep his mouth shut, he was visibly nervous. Bullet promised that he would make the documents in the best possible way, but there was still the risk of exposure. I really need this job, Sam said timidly. I see what you mean. The man behind the desk chuckled. Well, Mr. Salvatore, you're hired. And if you don't mind, it would be great if you start your duties tomorrow. And by the way, are you sure you don't want to live on Cedro Rodriguez's estate? There are comfortable facilities there for servants. Thank you, but I'm used to my home, Sam replied politely. Thank you very much. You're welcome, shrugged the owner of the company. He personally selected the staff for his VIP client. The main thing is not to disappoint Cedro Rodriguez. Otherwise, he looked at the guy carefully and smiled, as if he had told a very good joke. I'll never be able to tear your head off. Finding himself in the mansion of a man who was rumored to be working with the Colombian mafia, Sam was surprised by two things. First, he wasn't scared at all. And if you thought about it logically and soberly, he should have been. Because if he was found out, that would be the end of his journalistic investigation, along with his life. Secondly, Sam was struck by the blandness of the house. There were plastic windowsills and gold stucco on the ceiling, and there were an inordinate number of antiques, carpets, mirrors, and heavy wooden furniture. Sam found himself under Carlos, a strict servant manager who looked like a classic butler from a dark Gothic detective story. After giving the newcomer a critical and contemptuous glance, Carlos sent him to the second floor of the mansion to clean up the veranda. There was a lot to clean up because there were huge pots of sprawling plants whose glossy leaves were great dust collectors. Sam was well prepared with a detailed plan of the house in his head, and now he was going to sneak out to the backyard, where the garden was located. Hello, a woman's voice suddenly distracted him from his monotonous work and thinking. The veranda framed the patio, the doors of the living rooms faced it, and the owner of the voice appeared from one of them. She was a stately, spectacular brunette dressed only in a silk, lace-adorned negligee. Leaning against the door jamb, she regarded the new servant and bit her lip. Sam guessed who it might be, one of Mario's friends. Good afternoon, Senorita, he said politely. New here? Yes. She was barefoot and light-footed, but there was a kind of menace about her. And Sam guessed, because the next thing he knew, she was grabbing him by the collar of his shirt and coming so close that it was indecent. You're cute. You know, I miss you so much. I beg your pardon, Senorita. Sam fought back weakly. But I'm working. You work for Mario, which means you work for me too. She squinted her brown eyes. If I don't clean these leaves properly, see? Carlos is gone. Oh, you're so boring. She let go of him, grinned, but didn't go anywhere. When do you get off? Oh, 8 o'clock. Sam played the part he'd prepared. And then I'm going home. To my mom's. We live with her and my 4 other little sisters. It's a miracle I got this job. The pay is so good, and to serve in such a rich house. It's a palace. Yes, Mario has taste, smiled the brunette. My name is Sophie, and you? Rex Salvatore. At your service, Senorita. The brunette licked herself, bit her lip again, and gave him a hungry look. Would you like me to show you the house? After work. I think Mom will forgive you if you're a little late, and it's important for servants to know the place where they work well. Oh, thank you very much, Miss Sophie. It's very interesting here, she purred. It's a real labyrinth. It's important not to get lost. It's full of hiding places. Yes, I've heard about this estate. Sam's eyes widened. They say Senator Mario even has his own zoo. That's true, the girl replied thoughtfully. He has lemurs, spotted deer, lots of parrots. They're so cute, but the predators scare me. There's even predatory animals. Well, yes, Sophie was embarrassed, as if the latter was something she shouldn't have talked about with the maid. But they lived separately. Fantastic. I've lived on a farm all my life, Sam continued. I remember my dad promised to take me to the zoo to see the tiger, but I never got a chance. He died. It was a childhood dream come true. Poor thing. I could tell from his pitiful tone and the look on Sophie's face. Would you like me to show you the tiger? Unless it is not difficult for you, answered Sam timidly, as if hesitating. Wouldn't Senor Mario mind? Why should we tell him about it? Smiled the girl. Let it be our little secret. For the rest of the evening, Sam played the part of the industrious and diligent servant Carlos, did not give him a moment's rest. At 9 o'clock in the evening, he went around the house and lurked near the rose bushes. Sophie appeared unexpectedly. Sam realized that such her adventures with the servants the patron would obviously not approve. Carefully, glancing around, she led him into the depths of the garden. They passed the enclosures with peacocks, capuchins, deer. They went around the high hedge. This is it, Sophie said. Sam could see for himself. A tiger, a lion as white as milk with tired eyes and sparse mane, and a leopard walking nervously in circles with a hoarse growl were locked in several cages that clearly did not meet the needs of the animals. Perhaps Mario just hasn't had time to build spacious enclosures for the new pets yet, because the other animals were kept in quite normal conditions. Sam stepped a little closer and took a closer look at the tiger. His ear. Part of his right ear was missing. He remembered Rachel mentioning this peculiarity of her unfortunate guest. That's impressive, Sam said. A taste of danger, huh? Sophie laughed. She was suddenly very close. She wrapped her arms around his neck. It was as if she was wearing a scarlet tight dress now, but it didn't hide much more than a black silk negligee. Sam, in order not to ruin his game, was forced to hug her back. What's over there? He asked naively, pointing toward a tall wooden platform nearby. It looked like a platform, and he had to admit that the structure didn't seem to fit in with the mini petting zoo. I don't know. Who cares? Sophie mumbled, kissing him passionately on the neck. We're alone. I want you. Sam was panicking about how far he should go now for his journalist plans. It wasn't that he didn't like Sophie. She was a real beauty. But still, he somehow wasn't ready for this casual connection. Suddenly, there was a noise somewhere off to the side. Sophie jumped aside, apparently recognizing one of the voices. Oh, it's Mario. Run, hide. Sam was terribly happy about this development and ducked into the bushes, but lurked. Soon everything will be ready. Sunday, after the reception. Is that them? The second voice was very low and hoarse, some kind of half-dead. No, believe me, these are the most vicious beasts I've ever found. You'll be pleased. I hope so. And how pleased Stephen James will be. Sophie? The first voice didn't just speak angrily, it growled like a beast. What are you doing here? Honey, I was just taking a walk before bed. Get in the house. I'm sorry, honey. I said get in the house. Sam cautiously peeked out from behind the bushes. Mario, apologizing to his companions and grandfather in a striped suit and hat, was dragging Sophie under his arm and roughly in the direction of the house. Then his guest followed him. Sam stepped carefully, very carefully, out of the menagerie and dashed toward the servants' gate. Where the hell have you been? Carlos asked grudgingly. Seeing him, the manager had a way of personally making sure that all the workers left the estate after work. I had a burrito stomach, sorry. Sam said and left the territory of Mario Rodriguez, who was obviously up to no good, and this name and surname, Stephen James, seemed very familiar to Sam. After what he had learned, Sam realized that now he was faced with a very difficult choice. Theoretically, he could go to the police and claim that he knew where the kidnapped tiger was. But who knows how far, how deep Rodriguez's connections extend their tentacles. We'd have the tiger stashed away by the time the police arrived at his mansion. But that wasn't all that troubled Sam. Returning to his room, he immediately decided to check. What kind of man named Stephen James could talk about that guest Mario in a hat? In principle, there were many such people, but one of them interested Sam especially. He was a well-known human rights activist, reported missing after his car was found in the desert about a month ago. and something told Sam that the two men were talking about him. But then the situation was getting ugly, and Sam wasn't sure that it wouldn't be catastrophic if the police were involved right now, and that a plan was born in his head. A truly insane one. His partner, Billy, would never approve. Rachel, we need to talk. Sam showed up at the ranch on Friday, intent on sharing news and plans with the only person he could truly trust under the circumstances. Come in, Rachel smiled at him. You're just in time for dinner. You're not a vegetarian, are you? She pointed a finger at him. In that case, I'm afraid we'll only have peanut butter toast, because even stewed vegetables have meat gravy. No, I'm not a vegetarian, Sam said, and hoped his empty stomach wouldn't give him away with the hungry rumbling he'd missed. How long had it been since he'd had a home-cooked meal? Not since he'd left his parents' house, it seemed. No, sometimes Sam had cooked something at home, but often it was just reheated convenience foods, or something called stir everything in the fridge into a pan and stew until ready. He was greeted in the kitchen by heady smells. Rachel introduced him to her pet Rosita. Also sitting in the kitchen was Rachel's her brother Dean. So do the guy looking for our tiger? Asked Dean. Yeah, nodded Sam. There might be something to it. Okay, now let's get more details. Rachel, distracted from her meal, hurried him up. No, young lady. The housekeeper gave her a stern look. You won't save anyone if you don't have strength, and you won't have strength if you don't eat well. So first, be kind enough to eat everything, and then I'll serve coffee and talk as much as you want. After dinner, they moved to a large room, which in this ranch house, as Sam realized, played the role of a living room. The fireplace was burning, and this evening might have seemed cozy, if it hadn't been for the circumstances. Rachel's brother sat down in an armchair. Sam settled on the couch. The girl sat down beside him, and Rosita simply remained standing in the doorway. Bad tidings are better borne standing up, she said. What made you think I was bringing bad news? Sam asked. If everything was fine, you would have said so before you even crossed the threshold. There was some truth to that, Sam nodded. And then he told what he'd found out, starting from the moment he'd noticed the tattooed man in the diner to the evening's events at the Rodriguez estate. The scene where he had to cuddle with Sophie, he decided to leave out. Rachel was pacing the room with her fists clenched. I'm gonna get him. Chill out, sister. Dean told her. I think the police should handle this whole thing now. I've thought about that, Sam said, and laid out first his theory about why it shouldn't be done, and then his plan. I agree, Rachel exclaimed. No, young miss. Rosita literally swooped down on her. Don't dream, girl, that I'm going to let you be a part of all this. But you're not going to stop me either. Rachel raised her chin stubbornly. That tiger. I can't leave him in the lurch. She's right, sis. Dean shook his head. It's too dangerous. That's why I'm going with you. What? Wait, what are you all talking about? Sam's eyes widened. I'll be fine on my own. Rachel, and I can handle it. Rachel told me that this tiger has become quite tame. We can take him out. I've got it all figured out. Bo will help us to remotely disable the alarm system for just 5 minutes, and that'll be all we need. Hey, Dean got up and gave Sam a very menacing stare. I'm coming with you. Otherwise, the plan's off the table altogether. That's going to be harder, sighed Sam. But it seemed to be the only option. And Sam also knew that Bo wouldn't be happy when it turned out that he had to organize a fake invitation for an extra person. You know, I don't let anyone hurt my sister, Dean said. The small group was visibly nervous, but no one tried not to show it. They were all going to be in Mario Rodriguez's territory in less than an hour, and it was a little like stepping into a sea full of hungry sharks. You wouldn't think of a better role for her. Dean was a head taller than Sam, and so the fact that he was now looming over him, eyes glaring angrily, made a really solid impression. Let me remind you, Sam replied at the limit of his patience. I'm not in charge of what you're allowed to wear to this party, Bo is. So if you don't like it, then please all complaints to him. Dean squinted his eyes as if to say with his facial expression that he didn't really believe that nothing could have been solved otherwise. Relax, brother, Rachel turned to him. I've been in more trouble than this in college. Of course it was a joke, except the older brother wasn't in the mood for jokes, but he backed away from the detective journalist and ex-cop, bowled back, adjusting his jacket. In general, Dean was used to wearing simple and practical clothes, and in a strict, skinny suit felt uncomfortable. But those were the rules of the game Beau had put him on the electronic guest list under the name Francesco Renaud, an industrialist from France, interested in cooperating with Mario Rodriguez in terms of buying cars. Rachel was supposed to attend this evening under the guise of the specialist responsible for the lighting fixtures, garlands of paper lantern-like bulbs in the garden. But then it turned out that for whatever reason that was impossible. Beau had come up with what he thought was a great solution. Rachel was to go under the guise of a dancer, or rather a stripper, but of course it would not come to practical work because the small company of adventurers planned to sneak out early. It was even surprising that Rachel herself, unlike her brother, did not protest and generally took everything with humor. You should have worn that dress once anyway, she said that evening, appearing in front of a shocked Sam in a miniature gold-colored, open-shouldered outfit. What do you think? She asked and spun around, showing herself from every angle. Sam didn't say a word. It was just so strange and adorable for him to see Rachel in such a look instead of her usual jeans, loose sweaters and shirts, and with her hair down on her shoulders. Dean, apparently, understood well how Sam felt, because he had hinted several times during the evening that he wouldn't allow his little sister to be hurt in any way. Sam was the first to enter the estate under the guise of the same servants. Dean and Rachel showed up half an hour after him, and finally the three of them came together. Some guy in a hat tried to feel me up. Rachel wrinkled her nose and shrugged shakily. With a mustache? Sam asked. The girl nodded. Then it must have been the guy who'd been talking to Mario. So what do we do next? Dean asked, businesslike. Well, you two better stick together. No one will suspect that a businessman is hitting on a pretty dancer. Sam tried to reason with Sam, who was now really appreciating the benefits of Dean's jealousy of his sister. In fact, Rachel shouldn't have been alone in this place for a minute, because it looked like some of the high society was clearly criminal. I understand the evening will be divided into two parts. Closer to midnight, most of the guests would leave, but some of them, literally a few of the closest ones, would stay. Sam reminded his friends of the details of the plan. How are we supposed to stay? Dean asked the logical question. As planned, Sam sighed. You'll have to hide in the bushes. There's some work going on in the garden just beyond the rose garden. They're building pavilions and a pond, I think. There will be no one there tonight, so they could get lost. It will be easier for me to leave some of the servants in the house, so I can start cleaning early in the morning. The guests may be the cream of the crop, but they litter like that. And then, now Sam is looking at Rachel carefully. We still need to think about what we are going to do. If Roger doesn't want to come with us, that's not going to happen. Rachel said fervently, He's bound to recognize me, and besides, she rummaged in her purse. I've had some jerky in here. So said Sam. All we'd have to do is stick to the original plan, and hope nothing goes wrong. Sam tried to be brave, but only to himself could he admit that all his past tasks, whether he was a freelance journalist or a policeman, had never come with such risks. So far, however, things were going as if normal. The party, the first part of it, after which almost all the guests were leaving the estate, was over. Sam made a mental note to thank Beau separately for what he had done for them. The thing was, of course, Rachel and Dean had to leave the party as well. Rachel didn't have to, by the way. Performing, she masterfully pretended to twist her leg. Dean had volunteered, like a gallant, enthusiastic gentleman, to drive her to the clinic. Fortunately, this was all accomplished before Mario, busy with more important guests for the time being, wished to speak to a businessman from France, Bo had figured out a way for the two of them to leave the estate grounds and stay put at the same time. The thing was that they arrived in a modern car equipped with an innovative digital control system. How Bo had managed to get hold of this marvel of technology was anyone's guess. Bo had made sure to hack into the system and remotely connect to it to take control. Thanks to the fact that the car had a tightly tinted window, he was able to simply drive away empty. And so finally, the little group met at the agreed location. "I'll never wear heels again," complained Rachel, who had managed to change into light sneakers, which somehow miraculously fit in her handbag. "What's next?" "I think we can move on to the menagerie," Sam said. And there, he did not have time to say what they were to do next, because suddenly the whole little company froze like a flock of deer, frightened and at the same time mesmerized by the light of the headlights of a car rushing at them. Magnificent! Mario Rodriguez clapped his hands several times, as if paying tribute to the spy talent of the people who managed to lead him by the nose until now. So what do we have? There was no point in running or fighting, as everyone realized next to Mario and around Rachel, Dean and Sam were armed men, like evil spirits appearing out of the darkness. I didn't expect. Mario clucked his tongue. That someone would repay my generosity and hospitality so vilely. "So, who are you?" Rachel, Sam, and Dean looked at each other. If he was asking, he didn't know the true purpose of their visit, and that had some advantages. Sam was about to make up some plausible lie, but then a man stepped forward, the one he recognized as the one with the tattoo. He grinned and pointed at Sam. "I know him. He's an ex-cop. Remember I told you about the asshole who made us stop training in that town? The police." Mario arched his eyebrows. "How curious. Who are those two?" "I have no idea, but put them in my hands." The bandit glanced interestedly at Rachel. "And they'll be talking in no time. And I'd like to start with the girl." "I don't think that's necessary," said another man who had been looming behind Mario, standing in the shadows, but now came into the light. Sam took a closer look at him, and it was the same guy who had been talking about a certain Stephen. And it was the same guy who seemed to be making a pass at Rachel. So now he seemed really disgusting. "I'll bet," continued the man in the hat lazily, "they're common thieves. The boy's been dismissed from the police force, hasn't he? They must have decided to get their hands on everything. That's what really worries me." He turned to Mario. "It's your security service. How is it that such personalities are among your servants and guests? That, makes me question whether our cooperation is the right thing to do." "He's right," Sam said. "We to come here to steal, you see." After that man, your man, at these words, Sam pointed at the tattooed type. "Beat me up, I was almost crippled. My insurance couldn't cover the full cost of treatment, and yes, I decided that the best way to solve my problems was to take the money from someone who was getting it himself by dishonest means." Sam sent the owner of the estate a defiant look. "I know what you're doing here." "You do," Mario grinned. "What do you think I'm doing here?" "Doing dirty business with the mafia, laundering money." "You're right. I found people who agreed to help me for a share. And now I realize that I'm caught. I want to ask you for a favor. Are you in a position to make conditions?" "I'm just asking." "And what's that?" "Let my friends go. I'll stay here and take whatever punishment you deem necessary." There was silence for a while. Rachel and Dean looked at Sam puzzled. "Very interesting," Mario said. "But I have a good habit, which in particular helped me to accumulate capital. I never solved my affairs only halfway. And that's why. Right today, you're definitely not going anywhere. Now, you're going to be taken to a place." There was no point in resisting the armed guards, so I had to comply. Sam expected to be locked in a room at best, but they were taken to a part of the park where there was a menagerie and strange platforms. "You want them to be spectators of our little show? Well, I must admit, it's an ingenious way to get the truth out of them. Such a spectacle would impress anyone." The man in the hat turned to Mario. "Oh no, Alberto," the man grinned. I intend to make them directly involved in it. So in about 10 minutes, all the participants of the little adventure to save the tiger found themselves standing in a brightly lit area of the park. "What's going on?" Dean asked in a whisper, looking around. "I don't know," Sam answered. "In fact, the whole thing seems strange." "And what the hell are you doing?" Sam jerked away from one of Mario's men, who was spraying them with some kind of spray bottle. Why do I smell like bacon?" "You must be very curious to know what's going on here." Mario turned to the small group. He, together with the man in the hat and several other types, who looked like representatives of the Colombian mafia, as well as several armed guards, had climbed up on the platform and were now talking and looking at the captives from a respectable height. "Do I feel like we're kind of caged in now?" Dean asked, looking around. It was like that, using tall and thin metal posts. Mario's men had stretched a metal mesh between them, thus creating the sort of enclosure the prisoners were in. But in one place in the space there was no netting, and Sam realized it was an entrance. Or was it an exit? He didn't understand much at all. Mario smiled. In school, my favorite subject was history. There were so many interesting things to learn, but I especially liked the history of ancient Rome. Do you know what the patricians did with people they didn't like? They organized a kind of games. If a man had the means, you could get the Colosseum at home. So I thought that my, let's say, business partners would enjoy the fun of watching me deal with and now our common enemies. I recently made a valuable acquisition. A leopard, a lion, and a tiger. And I plan to start with the last one. I want to start with your silly little company, and then we'll move on to the others. Do you know what I mean? I get it, Rachel's talking. You want to set a wild animal on us. That's what this bacon-scented spray is for. You want us to smell like food. Smart girl clucked his tongue. Mario shook his head. And so beautiful. Too bad she was so stupid. But maybe I'll find a special pleasure. He licked his thin lips with his tongue, and Rachel thought she'd never seen anything more disgusting in her life. I'll find a special pleasure in watching such beauty destroyed. By the way, if you want, you can start begging me to save your lives. But as an honest man, I'm warning you, it won't work. In this business, sentimentality ruins everything. We understood Sam wasn't going to beg, and he was willing to swear that his companions wouldn't either. But can I ask you a question? I was just wondering. All right, ask it, Mario grinned. And I'll even answer it truthfully. After all, you won't tell anyone anything. The answer will very soon you'll carry to the other side of the world. Your man was talking about training. I want to know what it was. I want to know what those attacks on the homeless were for. That's a good question. Mario was clearly in a very wordy mood. You see, in this business, in the criminal business, many people come in. But how do you pick the best ones? How do you test those who aim high? So I came up with this test. He spread his hands. To check whether guys are ready to obey, whether they are ready, if necessary, to cause pain and suffering seemingly quite innocent and defenseless people. Attacking ordinary townspeople is fine, but it draws unnecessary attention. And the homeless, who needs that scum? So I decided, as a test, every person who wants to get a job with me, and not as a pawn, but for a higher position, will have to maim a couple of homeless people. And you, I must say, spoiled my plan. I had to give it up. You made a lot of noise. Did I? Sam was surprised. Of course I did. After the news about the maimed young policeman spread all over the state, the press became too interested in these areas. And where there's extra attention to cases that may have something to do with you, the more trouble there is, of course. So Mario wagged his finger at him. Consider what's about to happen to you as a kind of punishment for crossing my path. Begin. Opposite the passage to this peculiar enclosure, close to it, suddenly there was a cage being moved by putting it on wheels. The door rattled, rising, and the tiger got out. He stretched lazily. Meeting the muscles of such a huge beast was uncomfortable. Not comfortable in the cramped space. Sam exhaled. It was a formidable beast, and now he was only meters away from it. He suddenly remembered a documentary that showed a tiger attacking an antelope and thought that, in principle, they were now like 3 such antelopes. Sam, Rachel whispered, and then, before anyone could stop her, rushed forward. Raja. The girl fell on her knees in front of the animal and held out her hands to him. What have they done to you, my good man? Raja, it's me, Rachel. You remember me, come, you poor kitty. The tiger froze. His tail thumped nervously at his sides. He was thinking. Meanwhile, the people on the platform were in shock. What's going on? Mario asked. What the hell is going on? The tiger slowly approached Rachel. He sniffed her, and then suddenly cocked his head as if he were just an ordinary big cat coming for affection. The girl continued to talk to him, but now she switched to Italian, and Sam remembered what Rachel had told him, that the owner of the traveling circus from which Raju had been released was from Rome, and then she had said something to the tiger, and the next moment he had just thrown himself at the mesh fence, hitting it with all his weight. It was hardly the time for analytical musings, but Sam wondered what Mario had hoped for in putting up such a flimsy defense. Maybe he'd been a cheapskate. Millionaires, as Sam had heard, could be like that, or maybe he just thought that the tiger, roughly speaking, would be satiated with its prey and then calmly return to the cage, because his will was broken. Except the tiger met a man from his recent past, Rachel. The girl who helped him to become a much freer creature than a simple prisoner of a traveling circus. Sam thought that maybe tigers had a lot of similarities not only with domestic cats, but also with dogs. How else could it be explained that Raja obeyed Rachel and started to break the fence on some command? You idiots! Can't you see that? Shoot! Shouted Mario. But it seems that among those armed guys who were present in the manor here and now, there were not really idiots, and they realized that there was a great chance to hurt the tiger, which would only make him even more angry, and then he would definitely attack the person who hurt him. So the guards just scattered. Literally. What's next? Dean asked as he and Sam rushed over to the fallen fence Rachel and the tiger had first swung over. The phone. Where's your phone? I've got it, Sam reported on the run, thinking that not searching the prisoners because they seemed doomed was a very rash idea. He snatched up his smartphone and pressed a quick call. Bo! Shut down the gate alarms right away. What? No, now. We need to. There's been a change of plans. And there's a tiger with us. No, I'm not drunk. Bo, do as you're told. The park seemed to stretch on forever. As Sam ran, he thought about the poor lighting, and that if it weren't for some fantastic luck, they'd probably have broken their legs by now. Except for the tiger, of course. The tiger was as light as a feather and even a little forward, and Sam realized that it was focused only on Rachel. Raja. Suddenly Rachel shouted because the tiger suddenly rushed in the opposite direction to where the small group of adventurers needed to go. The girl rushed after the beast, trying to get it back, and Sam and Dean had no choice but to follow them. There was a noise, and in the next moment the source of the noise became clear from the side where the gate to the estate was located. Cars with sirens and loud shouts that the FBI demanded everyone to lay down their arms and surrender. But only Mario Rodriguez intended to run away. He ran off in the direction of the helipad. And then everything happened very quickly. Mario turned around and screamed when he saw a tiger rushing at him. The beast jumped. One of the millionaire's guards fired, but it seemed to be more in defense of himself than of his master. Rachel was screaming again. The FBI was closing in. Everything was merging for Sam into a crazy kaleidoscope. And a little later, looking back, he wondered how he hadn't lost his mind from such a variety of events. In less than an hour, it was all over. But the end began when the person Sam least expected to see running up to them was Detective Scott. Sam, what are you doing here? Hey, the detective signaled his men to let Dean, Rachel, and Sam go. Whoa, these seem like the good guys. What are you doing here, rookie? We're saving the tiger, Rachel answered for him. The girl was just furious. Miss, hastily, as if sensing her mood, Scott said. We just couldn't let the tiger eat our prime suspect. Don't worry, we were well prepared and used the gentlest drug to sedate the beast. He'll wake up in an hour. He'll be in a rehabilitation center. That's my tiger, you idiot. Rachel shrieked. He's mine, and if you try to take him away from me. What do you mean? Will somebody please tell me what's going on? Is there some other agency on a mission I don't know about? Scott looked really confused. So Sam tried to explain to him in a few words what was going on. And then he asked one question that was very important to him. Had the guy with the tattoo left? No, Scott shook his head. We didn't miss anyone. Soon Rachel and her brother and Sam were able to finally figure it all out. It turned out that the FBI had been preparing dirt on Mario Rodriguez for a long time, and were just waiting for the right moment to arrest him and the man in the hat, who turned out to be the right-hand man of one of the biggest Colombian mobsters. But things went a little bit wrong. Mario could have gotten away in his helicopter in time. If he hadn't been shot down a half-step away by a tiger. I'm still ashamed of the way things turned out. I got you kicked out, Sam told Scott as they sat in his office a few hours after the events at the estate. Well, that was really unexpected, Scott chuckled. My transfer, but I quickly rebuilt my reputation. And as you can see, I'm even continuing my career in a more serious status. You're blaming yourself for nothing, kid. You just wanted to do your job well. It was more of an oversight, it was basically stupid. Sitting in an ambush with a cup of coffee. How did it get poisoned in the first place? That guy, Scott said. His name is Antonio, by the way. He really thought you were homeless. But he also knew there were police all over the city. He gave money to the clerk at that store and pressured him with his methods. You slipped us some stuff till we blacked out. You know, Antonio was going to finish the job. He thought Mario was too soft. He thought he needed to test the newcomers harder. But now, Scott sighed. That's all in the past. The next day, Sam got a call from Rachel. The girl had spent hours on end with the tiger, taking care of his health, and it looked like the animal was on the mend. And then suddenly Sam made an unexpected offer. He was contacted by a man who introduced himself as Eric Cross, and it turned out that he was the author of documentary books, many of which received the status of bestsellers. Eric flew into town specifically to meet Sam. They met at a small cafe. But I don't understand, said the boy. Why do you want to write a book about me? I'm not suggesting that we do it together, Eric replied. You've proven yourself as a journalist. I suggest you move to a more interesting format. Naturally, you will also get a good percentage of sales. And then, don't you know you've already woken up famous? With these words, Eric put down on the table in front of Sam the latest issue of the newspaper from the town where Sam used to live. The boy frowned and pulled it towards him. The article on the front page said that after a long wait, a young policeman had single-handedly found a criminal who had terrorized the whole town. He had also, with the help of the tiger, prevented the escape of one of the leaders of the criminal underworld of the southern states. Sam could hardly believe his eyes. But it was real. I need to think about everything, he said. Sam wasn't sure that writing a book was such a good idea, but he didn't want to give it up too quickly. But for now, he had much more important things to do. Raja is feeling much better. Rachel had shared the news with him when he arrived at the ranch. That's good, Sam smiled. I'll definitely stop by and see him. But I also stopped by to see you. Really? Rachel shoved her hands into the pockets of her jeans and lowered her gaze. Why? Because I want to ask you out on a date. The girl froze. Then she looked at Sam intently. For a moment, he thought she was going to slap him in the face for looking so serious. But she said yes. It was agreed that he would pick her up at 8 o'clock in the evening, and they would have dinner at a small Italian restaurant. But before Sam left, Dean came up to him, and this guy looked tense. You remember what I said about not letting you hurt your sister? Sam nodded. That's why I'm asking and expecting an honest answer, Dean said. What are your plans for Rachel? The most serious, Sam replied. I love her.
Thank you for watching this video to the end. Subscribe to the channel. Like it, write comments if you like the story, and see you on the channel.